Hello everyone, welcome back, and in today's video we are going to discuss the top 25 chess endgames that every player must know, and I think these endgames will literally going to help you to improve your chess endgame skills drastically, because endgames are the third phase in a game of chess after middle game, and if you're having a good endgame, it would be much easier for you to convert any chess game. And if you are ever losing in a middle game, then by entering into the end game, I think if you're having a particularly nice end game strategy, then I think it would be much easier for you to make a draw or perhaps to win the game. So I think it's going to be a very critical lesson for everyone, even for a beginner to complete expert. So I hope that this video might help you to improve your chess. So let's quickly get right into it. Okay, so in this end game, we have the opposition, where you can see black is a pawn of just 2 moves from being a queen, and white played the move king to b1. And here, if black goes for simply by playing king c3, it leads to a blender because now it's a draw king. As you can see, it would lead to a stalemate, so it's not a good idea. So at the place of playing king c3, we need to attain the opposition, and what I mean by opposition here is there should be odd squares between the king, and the king should be on the same file, so basically we can get the idea which side is having the opposition. By playing the move, there should be an odd squares between the kings. You can see how there is an odd square, so basically here black is having the opposition because it's now white to move, and if white goes here, black can go here, and after king d1, pawn push, so basically the white is having a square and black can win the game. So basically, if in this position it would have been a black turn, black would have played king d3, black would have forged, and it would have turned out to be a draw. But now it's white to play, and it's winning. So this is what means by the opposition. Okay, so in this endgame, we can see that black is having a pass pawn, king versus king, and a pawn. But eventually, this position is a draw because you just need to put the king on the corner square, and there is nothing black can do. It's a complete dead draw position. As you can see, it's a stalemate. So the corner pawns are always a draw. Okay, so we have this endgame on the board. This endgame is from the game between Pragnananda versus Gujarati. Pragnananda is playing from the white side, and he played the move queen g6 check, offering a queen trade, and we have this position, and it's completely winning because after king f2, many players must be thinking that perhaps this king, the pawn is much faster than the king. You guys know the king is on time to catch the pawn. The reason is quite simple, because you can just simply draw diagonal from the pawn, and you can simply create a box like this. And if the king is able to enter this box, then definitely white can catch the pawn. So basically, black goes like here, and in this position, black is hoping that if white goes to capture the pawn, black can capture these 2 pawns. But in this position, white can simply play g4, and we have this kind of position where it's a block-like structure, and white can't enter to capture this pawn. So basically, after g4, if black tries to distract white's king, here you can't capture white's pawn because white's pawn is much faster on being a queen. So basically here black will try to capture this pawn like this. Okay, so here after this, after the king goes back, here white can simply play the move e4. And after black goes wherever, white can simply push the pawn, and again it's a bridge, and you can simply win the game. The game is over. So just look out for these fundamentals of endgames. It's very essential. Okay, so we have this endgame on the board where it's black to play, and black played the move king to b3, and black's idea is pretty simple. He wants to capture this pawn, and he wants to make queen, and black is already a pawn up. So in this position, most of the players just resign the game, but guys, this position is completely winning. Whenever you have something like this, it's completely winning because here you can simply play the move g6. It's completely winning. It doesn't matter how black will capture the pawn. If you don't capture, white is going to capture the pawn and make a queen. So you have to capture, and now comes f6, sacrificing another pawn, and basically now creating a pass pawn, and now it's a winning game. So for example, in this position, if black would have captured with the f pawn, now white must play h6 because after takes, now white can make a queen. You can't play you can't play f6 first because black will capture, and basically there is a pawn on h7, so it's not going to work. So basically, whenever you are having such position, always look out for the move g6. It is actually winning. Okay, so we have this endgame on the board where white's pawn is on h2 and the king is on f2. The king doesn't really matter, but the pawn is on h2. And the basic position here is black is having 2 pawns and we are having 1 pawn. So how to play this position? Is it a win or a draw? What's happening? So this position is considered as a draw only when the pawn is on h2. Basically, after king g3, white can simply wait, and if black tries to come near the pawn trying to capture the pawn, it's not going to work. First of all, you can't push because after takes, here we have the opposition, so it's not going to work. It's going to be a draw. So basically, black will try to come, and now you can now play h3 move, forcing black to push the pawn or to capture. If captures, it's a draw. So black have to push, and now you can simply wait in the corner. Nothing is happening because eventually it's going to be a draw. There are going to be no moves in the position, so it's going to be turned out to be draw. But it only works when you have this position on the board. The pawn remains on h2, and you have this particular position. Whenever you're having this particular position, then only it can be a draw, or else black will win the game. So always look out for such tricks like in the position. Okay, so we have this endgame on the board where our opponent played the move c4, and in most of the cases we simply capture the pawn and try to capture this pawn, trying to capture this pawn and trying to make a queen. But it's a completely wrong idea, because here, after capturing the pawn, black is simply going to push the b3, and after takes, black is simply going to make a queen, and black is completely winning. So what should be the best way after continuing the game after c4? Is white losing or not? So basically, after c4, there are many players who simply miss this move. Even stronger players. Simply playing b3 is completely winning for white, because it's a complete strong pawn formation. Because it doesn't matter how you capture the pawn, it will only land in a blockade structure, and nothing is going to happen. It's completely safe. But just remember, basically, if black captures with the c pawn, you must retake with the c pawn. If white captures with the a pawn, you must capture with the a pawn. It's a block structure. White is going to capture the pawn and going to win the game. So that's how you should try to defend the position. Okay, so we have this position on the board. This endgame is very common in every phase of chess in the endgame, where black is having a single pawn. So how to continue with opposition, or what does it mean by opposition? How should we ever continue the game? So basically, in this scenario, white is having the opposition. The reason is white can simply play the move king e3, and as the pawn is on e5, black can't play a move like king e5 to get the opposition. So basically, black have to push the pawn, and now white can simply go back, and again black can't go to e4 because the pawn is on e4. So he have to go king to d4. And here, to get the opposition, as I said, you need to come on the same file. There should be odd squares in between. So simply playing king d2. If you try to play king to d1, it's not a good idea, because black will get the opposition like this. So basically, you should simply play king d2. White is having the opposition, pawn check, and you can simply come in the center, going back, and simply playing king e1. King e1 is a very critical move. You can't play a move like king f1, because after king f3, black is having the opposition and he can win the game. So you should always come like king e1, because there's a pawn on e3. Black can't enter in e3 to get the opposition. You have to decide one square, and you can simply copy it, and eventually the game would be a draw. So you should always think of position. Okay, so in this endgame, passed pawn should be pushed. What do I mean by this is, material-wise the position is equal, but how to continue the game? Many players try to play like this. It's not what you should do. You should try to simply push a passed pawn. This pawn can't be captured. You just push the pawn, and eventually you will win the game. Okay, so in this endgame, try to create a passed pawn. What do I mean by this here is, white is a pawn up. Basically, white is having the pawn majority on the queen side. So white should try to make a passed pawn by pushing up the pawn, trading off the pawn, and eventually white is having a free passed pawn, and eventually white can win the game. So in the end game, try to make the things work, like creating a passed pawn. Eventually, it will help you to win the game, because passed pawns are extremely strong in the end game. Okay, so in this end game, we must know that connected passed pawns are immortal. Basically, what do I mean by this here is, white is having 2 pawns. Basically, you are having 2 pawns, and our opponent is having a single pawn. So basically, black is going for these 2 pawns, and we are going for this pawn. So basically, the way black goes here, black can't really capture this pawn because now we can simply start pushing up the pawn, and eventually you can see black is late. Black is basically late in capturing the pawn, and white would simply win the game. So basically, you can't capture the pawn, and you can simply wait, and eventually white will capture, and white would simply bring the king and try to push the pawn and would win the game. So basically, whenever you are having this connected passed pawns, they are immortal. They can't be captured by a lone king. So in a pawn end game, connected passed pawns are extremely crucial. Okay, so how to checkmate with the rook? So basically, if you want to ever checkmate the king with your rook and the king, you just need to coordinate the king and the rook in order to checkmate the king. You basically need to turn out how many squares you can. Basically, you just need to take away squares from the opponent's king. For example, you can play this. So basically, you are having half control of the board in your side. So basically, you can just bring your king in here. Basically, you can even move your rook back here. So basically, you are having the control. In this position, you can simply get the king with the rook, and here you can eventually start grabbing as much space as you can, like this. Basically, the king's area have been shorted eventually, like this. And here you can play this again, shortened. You can now bring the king near slowly and steadily, and you can again get the space. So you can see how white is slowly and steadily getting all the spaces and eventually getting all the squares like this. Basically cutting off, taking away one by one square, and eventually when the king reaches the corner, you can just have this position on the board and it would be a draw. Just remember, you should not you must always look out for the stalemates. Yeah, just don't turn out to be a stalemate. Just giving a one square to the rook king, and you can eventually make the black king, and it would be a draw. Sorry, it would be a win for you. Okay, so in this endgame, we are going to learn how to checkmate with the queen, and it's absolutely simple for by mating the king with a queen. The reason is simple. The logical way is to basically you can simply make a move of knight from the king. You can just look at the king, opponent's king, and you can just make a knight square. That's how a knight move, and you can just simply put the queen over there like this. And if the king goes back, you can simply again draw move like how the knight move, and you can just put again the queen like that. The knight moves like this. You can put the queen like that, and again you can just follow up and just eventually. And just critical point to note that you must not go for always. Like when the king reaches the corner, it's not a good idea to go here because it will eventually lead to a draw, a stalemate. So just whenever the king reaches in a corner, try to put it like this. Basically, just giving black at least one square to have some space to run away. Yeah. And now once we have this position, you can simply get the king into the game, and eventually you can simply checkmate your opponent, and you will win the game. So checkmate with the queen, try to make a knight, and you will win the game. Okay, so we have this endgame on the board. This rook endgame is very common in every phase of chess. Basically, your opponent is having corner pawn, rook versus a single rook. So how should you defend? The defend is very easy. You can simply put the king in the corner, and you can simply give a check to the black king, and you can basically control the b file, and you can just move the rook like all eternity. Black can't do a thing. You can just keep the rook on the b file, and eventually the game would turn out to be a draw. Okay, so we have this endgame on the board where it's again rook versus pawn versus a single rook. So basically, if the pawn is on b file or the pawn is on g file, it doesn't really matter. So basically, how to defend this position, you can just again keep the king at the corner, and you can keep the rook at the last rank with the king. And there is nothing black can do all eternity. Just remember that whenever black tries to give a check, just go into the corner square and nothing is happening. You can just simply wait by moving the king on the first rank, and eventually the game would turn out to be a draw. Okay, so we have this position on the board where black is having a pawn versus rook. And basically the pawn is on c file. It doesn't matter if the pawn is on c file or the f file, it means the same. So whenever you have such position, how to defend it, basically I call it the third or the sixth rank defense. If you are white, then it's the third then basically it's the third rank, and if you're black, it's the sixth rank defense. So basically, it's white to play. You just need to get the third rank under control, and the game is simply drop. Black can't enter in the third rank because the rook is controlling it. So basically, before entering in, you can simply move the rook like this. If black waits somehow, and if black ever pushes the pawn, you can now simply go back with the rook, and now there are no squares for black. If it tries to move the king, trying to checkmate in one, now you can simply start giving checks to black king, and there is no way black can hide because there are no squares on the board for black to hide, and eventually the game would turn out to be a draw. So always remember, in case of the pawn is on c file or the f file, there is the third rank or the sixth rank defense. It is very essential for every chess player to know. Okay, so we have this endgame on the board where black is having pawn rook versus a single rook. So how to defend it? It doesn't matter if the pawn is on d file or the e file, it remains the same. Basically, the pawn is in the center. So how should we defend it? Basically, it's black to play, and black played the move king d3, which is very essential and most logical move. You can't push the pawn, as I told you that it would be a draw. You can simply give check to your opponent all eternity and it would be a draw. So black will try to play king d3, trying to checkmate in one, and here you just remember, try to move on the short side of the board in the game of chess. Like you can just see that there are 3 squares, there are 4 squares, so it's a better idea to always go to a shorter side. And when black gives a check, you can simply move up, and now black will try to push the pawn. If black wants to push the pawn, he will try to first move the king to push the pawn, and now the moment black pushes the king, you can simply enter with the rook. With the king, black can't push because black will simply lose the pawn, and if he again gives a check, you can simply go back, and you can't push again because, as I said, white could give checks. So black will again try to play king d3, but now you can simply wait by playing the move like rook to d7. You can't play king d8, king d1 because it would be mate in one, but you can play rook d7 and you can wait, and eventually the game would turn out to be a draw. There is nothing black can do. Eventually the game would be a draw. Just remember to put the rooks on the d file. Basically, put the rook on the same file as the pawn, and eventually the game would turn out to be a draw. And yeah, just remember, whenever it gives a check and the moment king move, you should always try to bring the king near the pawn, and it would be a draw. Okay, so we have this endgame on the board where your opponent is having a pawn on h2, and it's only 1 square away from being a queen. So how should white try to defend it? There are many players, the white pieces, don't know how to defend it, and eventually they lose the game. So basically, the easy method to defend here is you just need to play a move like king a2, king b2, and the game would be a draw. You can't play a move like going up with the king because black would give a check and make a queen. And you can't move the king to the c2 as well because of rook a1, and you can't capture the pawn because you lose the rook with a check. So just remember, you just move the king to a2 and b2, the game would be a draw. Even if black tries to come with the king and the idea is to basically move the rook and make a queen, you can just allow black to do it. And the moment black reaches like somewhere like here, you can now start giving checks, and now there is no square for black to hide. And you can just keep giving checks to black, and the moment he tries to hit the rook, you can simply come back. And now you can just move like this and it would be a draw. There is nothing black can do in the position. Okay, so in this endgame, we have a pawn rook versus rook. So how to win in such an endgame? You must know, in order to win such an endgame, you need to firstly cut off the king to win the endgame. What do I mean by here is, in order to win, you need to cut off this king. So you can play a move like rook f3, simply cutting off your opponent's king. And basically, you can now simply get the rook. You can simply get the king and the pawn. And the lone rook can't stop a pawn. In order to stop the pawn, he basically needs to sacrifice the rook with the pawn, and eventually you can mate with the king and the rook, and it's a winning position. If black tries to come here, you can simply go back, and if it tries to come here, you can slowly and steadily simply kick the rook, and you can win the game by just making a queen, and it's completely winning position. Okay, so in this end game, you must know, you must always watch out for stalemates. Like in this position, white is completely winning, but if white ever plays a move like this, queen c7, there are no move for black to play, and it would be a draw. So there are many players in a chess community who often leads to a blunder like this, and they eventually draw the game which were they eventually were winning. So always look out for these tricks like draw. Like you can't even play a move like this because again it would turn out to be a draw. So you should always watch out for stalemates. Okay, so in this end game, you must know you should always try to activate your king in the end game. What do I mean by this here is you can see the position, material wise the position is equal, everything is exchanged, it's an end game. So basically white should try to bring the king into the game slowly and steadily and try to capture these pawns and try to activate your king and try to push the pawn, and you will win the game. So in the end game, try to use the king, as there are no pieces on the board in the end game. The chances of king getting mated are, like, realistically speaking, absolutely zero. Okay, so in this end game, it's just the same as centralize as developing your king in the end game. Basically, in this end game, we must know that we should always centralize our king in the end game, because once the king reaches the in the center squares, the king is having the mobility to go whichever side white wants, because there are, you can see, if the piece is in the center, it has the largest mobility. So try to centralize your king in the end game. Okay, so in this end game, we can see that white is having a bishop and a pawn, and this must be completely winning position for us. But guys, it's a draw position, and basically the wrong bishops and a corner pawn is a draw. Basically, you can I can already say that this position is a draw because we have a knight square bishop, and the corner square is of dark square. So if it is an opposite square of the bishop, it would lead to a draw. The reason is, if we ever try to get like position like this, we can't play a move like bishop c4. It will lead to a stalemate, and we can't even push the pawn. It would again lead to a stalemate. If we would have had a same square as the corner square, then it would have been a winning for us, because we could have simply put our bishop to the dark square and we could have simply checkmated our opponents. So basically the opposite squares and the corner pawn are draw. So basically if the pawn would have been on any other file except the corner file, then it would have been completely winning. If the pawn would have been on a7, it would have been winning, because as the corner square is the same color as the bishop, it is winning. Okay, so in this endgame, we can know black is the pawn up. Both the sides are having the opposite color bishop. So basically, opposite color bishops are draw. Despite being a pawn up, our opponent can't win this game, because the moment we can just move the game, we can simply move the bishop here and there. So basically, the moment black pushes up the pawn, we can simply sacrifice our bishop for the pawn, and eventually the opponent can't mate us with the help of the bishop, and it would be a draw. Okay, in this endgame, we have this position where white is having a single pass pawn and black is having the knight. So can really the white can simply win the game or not? Like, can white simply capture the knight and win the game? Let's see. So here this position is completely draw, because if ever white tries to, basically white can't give up the pawn for the knight because it would be a draw. So basically black tries to give a check, and black can simply come here, and black can simply wait, because the moment white pushes, he can capture. So if white comes here, you can simply move the knight like this. He can't push again because it would be a check, and it would again be a draw. So white will try to hit the knight, but now you can come here. It would be again like this, and if you try to push, it would be again black can simply capture the pawn, and it would be a draw. You can't, like, it doesn't matter how, like, what way you move. Like, here I can play knight f7, here I can come here, I can go here. If you would have come here, I would have gone on g8. It's completely drawish position. There is no way white can get a breakthrough. So even a knight can stop this pawn on the corner square. So it's actually a very effective idea. Okay, so in this end game, basically knight can't lose a tempo. What do I mean by here is basically we want black to move away so that we can get a king here and we can make a queen. But the basic point here is it's the white to play, and white is already controlling this f7 square. So if this position would have been black to play, black would have been forced to move away, and white can simply move the king and make a queen. But as it's white to play, white have to move the knight, and you just can't wait like this. And you can't just wait. The king move, you have to move the knight. Basically, we want a position where where the knight would have been on h6, covering the square, and it would have been black to move. But we can't really have this position on the board. If in this position there would have been a bishop instead of knight, we could have simply waited like bishop c4, and he have to move the king. We can simply make a queen, and we can win the game. So basically, the theme of this end game here is the knight can't lose a tempo. You can't just wait like this to cover the square. It's the same. Whenever the king reaches here, the knight would be over here, and you have to move the knight, and basically the position is completely drawn. Okay guys, so these were the 25 endgames that every player must know, even for a beginner to complete expert. Because as I said, the endgames are extremely crucial. So I hope that these endgames must have helped you to improve your chess skills. If it did, then make sure to like the video and make sure to share this video with everyone who are facing some serious issues in the endgame. I hope that these videos can be helpful for you. And I'm going to come up with these interesting videos like this, like 25 chess principles on middle game. I think these are the basic fundamentals of in a game of chess that every player must know in order to improve their game of chess. So I hope that these endgames would have helped you. I'm going to see you soon. Till then, stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess.